10 years. That's all it's been since Moana first hit theaters in 2016. 10 years since audiences were introduced to a young girl who defied her village, answered the ocean's call, and sailed beyond the reef with a demigod at her side. 10 years since Disney gave us one of its most beloved modern animated films. And now, in 2026, Disney wants to remake it. Not revisit it, not celebrate it, remake it. With Catherine Lagaya stepping into the role of Moana and Dwayne Johnson reprising Maui, the live-action show promises brilliant cinematic sights, sounds, and songs. But here's the problem. This remake isn't about nostalgia, it's about saturation, and 10 years is not long enough for nostalgia to breathe. The trailer itself, released on Disney's official YouTube channel, is straightforward. We see Moana once again answering the ocean's call, embarking on a voyage, and teaming up with Maui. The beats are familiar, the premise unchanged. The only difference is live-action spectacle. But spectacle alone doesn't justify existence. When the animated version is still fresh, still beloved, and still culturally dominant, a remake this soon feels gratuitous. And here's the uncomfortable truth. This movie only exists to make money. That's it. There is no artistic reason for Moana to be in live action. No creative necessity, no cultural demand. The animated film is still thriving, the sequels are still rolling, the streaming numbers are still dominant. The only justification left is profit. Disney knows that a live-action remake will make a ton of money, and that's the entire calculation. But here's the irony. You know what else would have probably made a ton of money? A 10th anniversary re-release of the original 2016 Moana. Imagine it as a sing-along edition. Packed theaters, kids and families belting How Far I'll Go together, and a communal experience that actually honors the film's legacy. That would have been celebratory, organic, and profitable. It would have leaned into nostalgia the right way, without undermining the animated franchise that's still expanding. And Disney knows how to do this. They've built an entire history on theatrical re-releases. 1937's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was reissued multiple times across decades, each time introducing the film to a new generation. Beauty and the Beast got a sing-along edition in theaters. The Lion King had its own sing-along re-release, filling theaters with audiences who wanted to relive those songs together. Even Aladdin received a sing-along theatrical run in the mid-90s. These weren't just cash grabs. They were communal celebrations of films that had earned their place in the cultural canon. They were profitable, yes, but they also reinforced legacy. And here's another layer. It's not like this live-action Moana is a film adaptation of a Broadway musical version. That would at least make sense. Disney has a long tradition of translating its animated films into stage musicals, and then sometimes adapting those musicals back into film. The Lion King had been running on Broadway since 1997, becoming one of the most successful stage productions of all time. Beauty and the Beast premiered on Broadway in 1994, proving that Disney animation could thrive in live theater. Aladdin followed suit, bringing its magic carpet ride to Broadway audiences. Even Frozen, which released in 2013, got the Broadway treatment, debuting in 2018 and running for several years. But Moana? Nothing. No Broadway musical, no stage adaptation, which is strange given its popularity and its music-driven storytelling. If any modern Disney film seemed tailor-made for Broadway, it was Moana. The ocean as a living character, the ensemble of villagers, the soaring ballads, it all feels like it could have been reimagined for the stage, and yet Disney skipped that step entirely. And here's where the justification could have existed. If this live-action Moana had been a reimagining of a Broadway show, if there were a Broadway cast, Broadway arrangements, Broadway staging, then the remake would carry a different kind of legitimacy. The marketing would write itself. See the Broadway cast bring Moana to life on the big screen. That would have given the remake a unique identity, distinct from the animated version, and it would have stood apart from Disney's other live-action remakes like Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and The Lion King, which were simply reimaginings of their animated originals. But because Moana never got a Broadway show, Disney doesn't have that angle to lean on, which makes this remake feel even more gratuitous. And here's the perfect contrast. Taylor Swift's The Eras Tour. Released in theaters, it grossed $261.6 million globally. And that box office return makes sense when you consider the economics. Concert tickets for Taylor Swift are astronomically expensive compared to a movie ticket. So when audiences flock to see the Eras Tour in theaters, They weren't cannibalizing the live concert market. Most of those people wouldn't have gone to the live show anyway because the price point was too high. The theatrical release gave them access to an experience they otherwise couldn't afford. Now imagine if Moana had a Broadway adaptation. Disney could have filmed that production and released it in theaters. That would have been justified because Broadway tickets, even nosebleed seats, are very expensive. I remember seeing The Lion King at the Buell Theater in Denver back in 2006, and even the cheapest seats were pricey for the time. A filmed Broadway Moana would have opened the door for audiences who could never afford to see the live show or national tour. Musical theater purists would still prefer the live experience, but most casual fans would still for the movie theater version because it's cheaper. That's not cannibalization, that's accessibility. Disney even did this with Hamilton. They taped one of the shows and released it on Disney+. That version got flack because Disney censored it down to PG-13, but the principle was sound. Film the stage show, make it accessible, and expand the audience. If Moana had a Broadway show, a filmed version could have followed that same logic. But without that, the live-action remake is just a rehash of the animated film without any new medium or justification. And here's where the nostalgia gap matters. Disney's other live-action remakes at least had time on their side. The Lion King didn't get its remake until 2019, 25 years after the 1994 original. Beauty and the Beast was remade in 2017, 26 years after the original. Aladdin was remade in 2019, 27 years after the original. Even Lilo and Stitch, which originally released in 2002, got its live-action remake in 2025, 23 years later. Say what you want about those remakes, but the timing worked. The kids who grew up with those films had become adults with disposable income. Many of them even had children of their own. So when they flocked to the live-action versions, it wasn't just about reliving their childhoods. It was about sharing those memories with the next generation. As long as Aladdin still had Prince Ali, or The Lion King still had Can You Feel the Love Tonight, or Beauty and the Beast still had Be Our Guest, audiences were willing to accept the remakes even if they were gratuitous in nature. But Moana? 10 years is not long enough. The kids who grew up with Moana are still kids. They don't have disposable income yet, and they're not nostalgic adults looking to relive their childhoods with their own children. They're still living that childhood, which makes this remake feel not just gratuitous, but mistimed. Disney isn't waiting for nostalgia to build, they're forcing it, and in the process, risking dilution of a franchise that's still actively expanding. Disney's approach to remaking its classics often involve a long, thoughtful process, allowing stories to mature and evolve before revisiting them. For instance, the 1990s live-action version of The Jungle Book took a completely different path by removing the music and aiming for a more faithful adaptation of Rudyard Kipling's original stories. Then, decades later, the 2016 remake returned to reimagine the beloved 1967 animated film, blending cutting-edge visual effects with the charm of the original. This layered approach shows Disney's willingness to experiment and respect the source material over time, rather than rushing to remake a property while it's still fresh. In contrast, Moana is being fast-tracked into a live-action remake barely a decade after its original release. This rapid turnaround leaves little room for creative reinvention or meaningful reinterpretation. Instead of exploring new artistic directions or expanding the story's universe, the remake feels like a straightforward replication, banking on the original success rather than innovating. This strategy risks audience fatigue and diminishes the impact of the original film's legacy. When remakes are rushed, they can undermine the unique qualities that made the original resonate, reducing beloved stories to mere products of commercial timing rather than creative inspiration. Moana deserves more than just a quick cash grab. It deserves the patience and respect that comes with thoughtful storytelling and genuine artistic vision. And that's the problem, because when you remake something too soon, you're not giving it the chance to evolve into nostalgia. You're not letting it breathe, not letting it settle into cultural memory. You're interrupting its natural life cycle. Moana is still in its prime. It's the most streamed movie across platforms. It just had a billion-dollar sequel, and a third film is on the way, inevitably. This isn't a legacy title being dusted off for a new generation. It's a current franchise being cannibalized by its own studio. The result is a kind of creative short circuit. Instead of building new stories, Disney is doubling back on ones that are still alive. And that's where the risk lies. Because audiences don't just want familiarity, they want meaning. They want stories that matter, stories that feel like they were made for them, not recycled for profit. When Disney remade The Lion King or Beauty and the Beast, at least there was a generational gap. The kids who grew up with those films were now adults, many with children of their own, ready to relive their childhoods while sharing them with the next generation. That's what made those remakes palatable, even if they were gratuitous. But with Moana, that generational gap doesn't exist. The kids who grew up with Moana are still kids. They don't have disposable income. And they don't need a remake to relive their childhood because they're still living it. Which means this remake isn't serving nostalgia, it's serving redundancy. And redundancy doesn't inspire audiences, it frustrates them. And here's the irony. Disney knows how to play the long game. They proved it with Frozen. They spent decades trying to adapt The Snow Queen, failing over and over until they finally cracked it in 2013. And when they did, they created something original, something fresh, and something that resonated globally. That patience paid off. But with Moana, there is no patience. There is no creative struggle. There is only the reflex to remake immediately because the brand is hot and the profits are guaranteed. That's why the live-action Moana feels so gratuitous. It's not the product of innovation, it's the product of impulse. It's not about honoring a legacy, it's about exploiting a trend. And in the process, Disney risks undermining the very thing that made Moana special, its originality. So when we watch this trailer, what we're really seeing isn't a celebration of Moana. It's a symptom of Disney's remake machine. A machine that doesn't wait for nostalgia, doesn't trust legacy, and doesn't care about dilution. A machine that remakes because it can, not because it should. And maybe that's the ultimate irony. The best way to honor Moana would have been to trust the animated film's staying power, not to remake it before it's even had time to age.